Me, she's amazing. And a long way in creating a positive change in the world. She is a software engineer at Microsoft, building services that manage Microsoft's cloud infrastructure. Beyond her role, she thrives as an influential leader within various tech communities. Hope's commitment to propelling tech communities forward is most evident in her pivotal roles. She is an integral part of organizations like Women Who Code, where she contributes to creating a supportive space for women in technology. Additionally, her involvement extends to the Azure Nigeria community, where she participates in initiatives that drive technological advancement across the African continent. Moreover, she extends her expertise as a mentor in the Tech for Dev community, guiding and empowering fellow women on their growth journey. Her engagement isn't limited to these communities. She also organizes training sessions and meetups encompassing subjects like tech interviews, algorithms, data structures, cloud computing, and career progression. She always strives to create an environment that nurtures continuous learning and professional growth. So we are really excited to have Hope here, and I can't wait to see what she's going to share with us. So with that, I will give the floor to Hope.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, yeah. Hopefully no technical issues. All right, let me share my screen. And I hope you can see my screen as well. Okay, that sounds good. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's session. And I know some people are excited about the session. Hopefully some others are as well. And hopefully I get to meet your expectations today. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the session. Too much hopes. All right, so we are going to be talking about observability, when it comes to web applications today. It's starting from generally observability. So first off, I would like to know, when you hear the term observability, what actually comes to mind? What do you think about? What is something like, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the term observability, right? So whether this is the first time you're hearing it or whether you've heard about it before, but the first time you heard that word observability, what is something you thought of? So please drop it on the chat. I want to know what comes across your mind, right? So while we are doing that, let's look at this scenario or this issue. So it's a Monday morning, right? I would say Monday morning because things usually happen over the weekend. I don't know why issues always happen over the weekend. So something happened over the weekend, your application is not working, users are unable to log in, they can't register, they can't check out. The application is just failing. And then you come in on Monday morning after that amazing weekend you had, and the first message that greets you is, hey, your application is not working. And then there is fire on the mountain, there is pressure, and everybody's like, we need to get this back as soon as possible. So are you like this, where you are kind of like, debugging and finding out what exactly is the problem? You have no idea what exactly the problem is, not to talk of even, resolving the issue. Or you are like this, where you're like, hey, don't worry, I've got this. I know where to, start looking, and don't worry, we'll be back in no time. So, which of them are you? All right, so let's get back to the chat and see. Okay, people say data and system metrics, awesome. And a lot of people agree as well. Okay, maybe logs or something like that. Well, you're on the right path. Okay, so back to the presentation. Let's start with, where exactly am I? I know Nicole already did a good job to kind of introduce me, right? But so you already know most of the things about me. I'm Hope Oluwalolope. I'm originally from Lagos, Nigeria, where I grew up and lived almost my entire life before I moved to Vancouver, Canada. That's why I was surprised about Vancouver being sunny, whereas Seattle is like all rainy, because these two places are like really close together and we usually share the same weather. So I'm shocked why the weather is totally different today. So, and I'm a software engineer at Microsoft. I've been at Microsoft for almost 3 years, and I've been on the same team where we are trying to provide containerization support to Microsoft's cloud infrastructure layer. And because I am very passionate about, creating a safe space where everybody can feel very comfortable, like where we are today, feel very comfortable to be themselves while you are learning and growing. That's why I like to contribute to several tech communities, including Women Who Code. And some fun facts about me: I sort of taught myself how to ride a bike, as you can see in that picture while I'm smiling. And this made me realize that I can do anything I set my mind to do. And then on the other hand, I always like to distress by, watching TV shows and series. But then I kind of take it to the extreme where I can watch for a couple of hours, and if possible days. I've literally done to this straight. So that's a little bit about me. Now, while I'm going through the presentation, if you feel like something resonated with you, you are learning something, or you feel like you want to, tweet about it or talk about it, feel free to tag me at I am Ebony Hope. That's my Twitter handle, Instagram as well, in case if you use that. And my LinkedIn is just Oluwalolope. Now, about today's topic. So what are we going to be talking about? We are going to, of course, talk about what observability is. We need to describe or go into details of what exactly this term observability is, especially for those people that are kind of hearing it for the first time, or, you've heard about this word and you're like, oh, what exactly this is? This sounds somehow, or this sounds new or anything. So we are just going to kind of understand what that term means. Then we are going to go into the differences between monitoring and observability, because they sound similar, but we're going to go into that detail. Then why you need observability, and then some tools, frameworks, and platforms that can allow you to get started. So that's where we're going. So now that you know where we're going, let me make a point that if you have any questions, I don't know if people are allowed to unmute. Nicole, are people allowed to unmute, or they can just ask questions via chat?
I'm sure. I think I think just by chat, maybe in a panel like this.
Okay. So maybe if there is any question on the chat, so can you, feel free to kind of stop me and let me know if it's like an audience question we need to take care of.
Sure. Yeah. So on.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. So now that we know where we're going, let's talk about observability. What exactly does this term means? I sort of like to say it's the ability to observe. So literally what the word is, right? But technically what it means is that it's the ability to be able to kind of measure, monitor, understand, or kind of view what is going on inside a system. So kind of seeing a system as a black box, and you want to know what is happening inside that system based on the data that is coming out of the system. So technically it's like, oh no, okay. Yeah, sorry. So technically it's like, I want to understand what is, happening inside our system based on whatever is coming out of the system. So the goal of observability as a whole is for you to be able to easily root cause issues. Like when there is an issue, you're able to understand what the issue is, which is always the first point, because if you don't even know what the issue is, how are you going to be able to provide solutions to it? Or how are you going to even figure out where the problem is, right? So being able to understand issues, root cause issues, and, at the end of the day, troubleshooting and finally resolving that issue using whatever data is coming out of your system. So technically, I don't have to, when there is an issue, that's not when I go to my system and trying to understand or trying to put a debugger in the system to say, hey, I want to know what's going on. I should be able to say, I already know there's data coming out of this system. I can be able to analyze that data and figure out where the problem is. So that's technically the summary of, the term observability. So the more observable your system is, which is like the more, you're able to get data out of your system and analyze this data, the easier it will be for you to be able to move from, oh, we found out an issue. And you're moving from that, I found out there is an issue, to we are resolving that issue. Is going to be based on how observable your system is. So I would say the time it takes for you to move from being able to identify a problem to finally resolving that problem is usually, and it's very dependent on how observable your system is, right? So now I know I'm still using the term observable, and you're like, well, this is sounding like, yeah, I should just monitor my system and then I will be able to understand what is going on, right? So that brings us to the whole, fight and story or issue with monitoring and observability. Now, these two terms may sound kind of the same, or in your mind, you are kind of like, well, observability sounds like, sophisticated term for monitoring, because what you are kind of explaining is monitoring. Because I mean, even in the definition, you're saying ability to monitor, right? And I sort of hear you, because I was reading an article and then some people had this, where somebody was trying to say, oh, observability, because we feel like, developers are kind of tired of hearing the word monitoring, and we decided to repackage it and give it to them, right? Or somebody else were like, because we felt like we rebranded DevOps and people embraced it, now we feel like, oh, we can rebrand monitoring too, and we're supposed to just accept it that way, right? So there is this whole huge, clash between, I feel observability is monitoring, so why are you trying to kind of repackage it for me, right? Let's just cut to the chase and tell me that monitor your system, which I technically used to do, right? That's what people would say. But I'm not fighting or engaging in that kind of fight, but I would just say, this is the article I read in case you want to read it. But I would just say there are kind of differences when it comes to observability and monitoring. So let's go together to see, okay, is there like a huge difference, or are we just rebranding monitoring as observability? Let's go on that journey together. So monitoring, observability. Now, when it comes to monitoring, technically you're still using data, right? You're still trying to make use of the data that comes out of the system. But what you're doing is to track certain performance indicators. So kind of, that, or we have this indication that our system, we don't want our system to lag beyond a certain particular point of time. Like when users are loading the page, once the time it takes to load a page is becoming more than 10 seconds, that is becoming a problem for us, right? So you already have kind of a data that you're trying to monitor. So technically, you are using the data to look out or watch out for that exact kind of index, that performance index, to say when something is going beyond this time or is getting less than this time, we want to get to know. We want to be alerted of the situation. We want to start, figuring out what the problem is. Right? That is the only time you're kind of alarmed, right? So technically, hi.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt. Your audio just went a little bit wonky. I just want to let you know. Oh, that's actually like better now, a little bit.
You can hear me now?
It's still a little bit less than before, but yeah, it's a little bit better now. So yeah.
Okay. What about now?
Yeah, that's a little bit better. I think we'll be able to hear you with that. Thank you.
Oh wow. Okay.
Is that good for everyone else?
I hope this doesn't go off. Is everyone okay with the audio? Are you still able to hear me?
Oh, it just went a little bit backwards again. I'm so sorry. I hope to interrupt.
No, it's me. Oh wow.
Yes, people are saying it sounds like it's a low volume. Yeah.
Low volume? Okay, wait, just a minute. Let me see.
Yeah, sure. Take your time, please.
Oh wow. Okay. How is the audio like?
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much.
Is it okay? Okay.
Yeah, that's back.
Okay. Hopefully it doesn't go off. Whenever it goes off, please feel free to let me know. That's serious. Okay. Okay. So please, whenever it goes off, just feel free to let me know. I hope we don't have audio issues again. All right. So yeah, getting back. So like I was saying, when it comes to monitoring, we are kind of tracking a particular performance indication, right? You already know kind of what you're tracking, right? But when it comes to observability, you are getting this data out of the system, but you're trying to use it to understand how the system is behaving. It's not like you're tracking anything most times. It's more like, oh, I just want to get insights from I want to get insights about my application. I want to get insights about my system based on this data. And then this is why people tend to say when it comes to monitoring, you are looking for issues that you already know exist. So it's kind of like, oh, we already know that it takes, when it comes to a particular page, when users are trying to view a particular page, we know that it may take a bit of time. So we want to always know when this is becoming too much of a problem for all our users, right? So you already know this issue exists and you just want to keep tracking it so that you can either do something about it or get alerted when it's becoming a viral issue, right? But in terms of observability, you don't even know. Like sometimes you don't even know an issue exists, and the data or what you see will allow you to be able to discover that, oh, there is actually this issue with our platform. Oh, we didn't even know that a particular page takes forever to load for customers. And now we are beginning to realize that, this page is becoming, it's going to be a bottleneck and a problem for our users. Or, oh, now this is why our users don't even like to use our application because this page takes forever to load. So those insights are something you get by doing observability. Also in monitoring, I already used the term, you tend to see the system as a white box, meaning that you are kind of seeing it as a transparent system. I know what I'm watching out for, but I don't know what is happening in the system, but I kind of know what I'm watching out for. As opposed to, I don't know what is happening in the system. I'm not watching out for anything. I'm just looking out for what comes out. I'm drawing insight based on what comes out, right? So, as I'm going through this monitoring and observability, I know you are beginning to feel like, well, they sort of go hand in hand, right? It's not like monitoring is a whole lot different than observability. Something like you're even feeling like I can't do without the other. I can't say I'm doing away with monitoring because observability has come here to stay, right? So I hope you've seen that pattern because technically what is happening is that observability is kind of like a bigger umbrella for monitoring. So yeah, observability is kind of like a bigger umbrella for monitoring. So technically, we've been doing monitoring before. We've been trying to track something. We figure out that, or customers complain that we are unable to, probably check out from this page after some time or during a particular time of the day. There is so much, it feels like there's so much people always using this thing, and then it kind of takes forever to be able to submit a particular form or something. So we tend to depend on users to give us this feedback, and then we start tracking based on what users tell us. So when the user tell you, oh, I'm unable to log in, that is when you start tracking. So with observability, we don't want to depend on users anymore. It's like, can we draw these insights from our own application even before our users get to know? Are we able to understand what is happening and even start tracking it before our users even report it? So I see observability as kind of like, a bigger umbrella that takes in monitoring under its wings. So they don't work independent of each other. And it's not like, oh, observability is kicking out monitoring. And it's kind of like telling you to go through a new sort of starting a new sort of way of life or something. It's kind of just trying to say that you've been doing monitoring before. Let's take this bigger, go big and do more with what you've been doing. Do more with your data, get more data and draw more insights from it. And then in turn, kind of monitor this set of KPIs, right? So an example would be for monitoring, you are kind of saying, oh, my application is failing, right? For example, but with observability, you can be able to even add data. You can add more context to a particular KPI you've been tracking. So we've been tracking that sometimes the application fails, and most times it's probably during the weekend that it fails. So we don't want to come on Monday morning and have customers calling us via like bombarding us with calls and emails that the application is not working again. So we started tracking that application fails, right, during the weekend. So whenever we get this alert that application has failed again, we want to be able to go root cause this issue. Now with observability, you are not going to just be root causing it blindly and be crying like the picture we saw. What is going to happen is that you're able to say, oh, I have more data that has provided me with more context to be able to say, I know where the problem is, right? This application is now failing because there is a particular null exception in a particular component. So it's not just going to tell you blindly, right? It's going to tell you that this particular component, and sometimes down to the particular method that is actually failing, and this is why the application is failing. So it's very easy for you to detect that, oh, okay, this is where the problem is, and you can easily fix it. So technically, if you don't get anything away from this talk, I'm just trying to say, we are not trying to kick away monitoring. What we are trying to do is modernize monitoring. We are trying to like make monitoring better by, doing more with your data, observing your data more, so you can monitor your applications better, sort of. So it's kind of interwoven. I just hope you sort of get it just. So if you've probably, or if I've not done a good job in kind of convincing you as to the reason why you probably need observability, or why you need to start embracing the culture of observability, I want to tell you a story about, a benefit of observability. Now, this chart on the left is a real chart from our system. So we, like I already said, I work on providing containerization support in Microsoft. So we have containers that we sort of monitor, right? We have containers that we are kind of working on. And this chart is something I created, I'm working on to sort of let us know when the percentage, let us know the percentage of LD containers we have versus un-LD containers. So this is percentage of LD containers, like at specific time. I think this data is taken every few hours or something. So now, one day, during the weekend again, things happen every weekend. I don't know why. If you check this date, August 12th was actually like a Saturday. So it was during the weekend. So we've been having, our percentage around 80, 70 sort of trend. So it's literally been on that trend. And we've been trying to even bump it up to 95. You see that cutoff line, right? So one day, I think it was like early Monday morning or maybe Saturday night or something, my manager just came to the chat and was like, what is happening? Why did we have a dip in, the percentage of our healthy containers? How did we go from 80, 70 down to 20? So what exactly is happening? And this is a cause for alarm because we had never had that situation. This is like, meaning that a huge number of the containers have like started to fail, right? So, we got this. We had alerts, actually. We had, monitoring in place, like we always say. We had the monitoring in place that had alerts to say, hey, containers are failing, but there was no impact. Like we couldn't see the impact from the alerts. Yes, we had alerts, but you can't see the huge difference. You can't see that, oh, this number dropped from 80 to 70 to about 27%, right? So with the chart, we're able to see that, oh my God, this is a big issue and this is a cause for alarm. And then we started to figure out, okay, what exactly is the problem, or where did the problem, where is the bottleneck, like where the problem start from, right? And then providing containerization is a lot, right? And when it comes to cloud infrastructure layer, that's a whole lot. So we have several components kind of involved, like a whole lot of components across several teams. So you can imagine the pain it would be to be able to figure out that, okay, which actual component is the culprit here and causing this problem, right? Thankfully, well, I wouldn't say we have the best of observability in place. That's why I'm giving this talk. And that's why I'm learning about this. So we are kind of still trying to improve when it comes to observability. But thankfully, we kind of have some sort of observability in place, right? We have logs, we have metrics, we're still working on traces, right? So we were able to everybody was able to go into their logs to figure out what the issue might be. And then we found out the actual component that had a problem. And then we realized that, oh, it was a bug in a particular component. And then we rolled out this bug, and then it brought out the entire container down. So my lesson in this story is, what would have happened if we didn't have, let's even start from monitoring in place, right? The basic of it, or like we didn't have alerts in place, and we didn't have, metrics in place, or we didn't have this chart in place. We would not know that this is a problem. Now that bug will get rolled out everywhere. Customers are going to come back shouting at us as to, why did you bring down my container? Why did all my workloads go down? All the stories. And then it's going to be a whole amount of sweat. Trust me, when you are trying to debug under pressure, and we are debugging when there is no pressure, it's two different things. So it's always good when you find out the situation first, and you are debugging with like less pressure from your customers, as opposed to, yes, there are customer calls, there is like this, big meeting and all that, right? So the moral of my story is that if you feel like, observability is kind of a buzzword, and it's that thing out there, just the same way everybody was shouting Kubernetes, containers, that's the same way observability is. I'm trying to tell you that, no, this is different. This is something that, no matter how small the application you are building is, you sort of need some form of observability in place. The smallest of it all, make sure you are able to at least understand what is going on, right? When there is a problem, where do we even start from? Even if it's as small as that. So that's what I'm trying to advocate here. So now that I've been able to hopefully convince you to go on this journey of observability with me, I know you may feel like, okay, I want to get started. How do I, what are the things I need to know about? What are the different, building blocks when it comes to observability? So far, I hope there is no question.
No questions in the chat yet. I'm
Okay.
sure they'll ramp up when we get into all this stuff.
All right, so moving on. Building blocks of observability. So before we get into the details of, what exactly the building blocks, pillars, all those things are, let's paint a scenario that we can work with. So normally, let's say you have an e-commerce application. Normally what happens is that the user, clicks on checkout. They have no idea what happens after that. And, your front-end application probably makes some requests to some API and all that. And all the user says is that checkout was successful or checkout failed. Now, this API has thousands of things that it does. Sometimes the minimum can be, it first processes the items in the carts. It knows that somebody added a pen, added paper, added some clothes and all. And then it has to go to the backend to fetch the details about, these items, including the price. And then there is another maybe function or another API that is going to say, okay, I'm calculating the total amount of these items. And most likely you are calling an external payment platform that processes these payments, takes the entire money and all that, and comes back to you to say, hey, okay, I have, made the payment. And you probably have another thing that sends a receipt to say, hey, your payment was successful and all, before you can finally tell the customer that, before you finally come back to the customer to say, oh, your checkout was successful, your checkout failed. Now, this sounds like a complex system, no matter how small it is, right? When it comes to when there is a problem, because things are small until when there is a problem. So coming to observability, there are pillars of observability. You probably would have been hearing about them. You probably have heard about some. So I call them building blocks because they are just like the three important key things you need to know when it comes to observability. And what are they? We call them metrics, traces, and logs. You probably have heard of one of this, or none of this. It's okay. So when it comes to metrics, what are metrics, right? Metrics is like, I tend to say they're like time series data. They are telemetry data that can be aggregated over time. So anything that you can count, anything that you can, measure. So anything that gives you a number, more like, the number of requests that was made, the number of requests that failed, number of successful requests, the time it takes to go from checkout to seeing whether successful or failed, or the time it takes for a particular page to load once a user even makes the call to get this page. All those things, right? Time, count, anything that is a number can be seen as a metric, can be tracked, can be collected as a metric. So this can vary, based on your application. You can customize it based on your application, but there are just some generic metric when it comes to any application that most of these tools kind of come inbuilt with. So when it comes to page load request, I know most tools kind of already come with it, right? So we have metrics, which mostly, and is very useful when it comes to identifying trends. How were we able to know that, percentage of containers went from 70 and 80s down to 20? Is because we had the metrics that had that number that we've collected over time, and we realized that this is unusual. Right? So traces. Now, traces data that kind of tracks the request, a particular request, as it goes from when the request was made down to when the request ends. So the journey of a request from start to finish, that's literally a trace. So you use it to kind of record, a particular event, how it went through the application and all that. So the sequence of it going through the application, you can record it as a trace. And this is always very useful when it comes to locating problems. So in terms of our scenario, right from when the user clicked on checkout down to when they saw, successful and failed. Remember, the user only saw I clicked on checkout, and then maybe it came back to me whether it was failed or successful. And then all he saw was a rolling button or something. But all the time, your request was going through several components, probably external APIs, internal APIs, and functions. So what is that thing you're able to use to say, okay, this request went through the several places, and this was what it did while it was there, right? That's what a trace gives you. And then with logs, because trace would only give you that it went here, right? Sometimes it doesn't give you so much details of what happened when it went there. With logs, you're able to capture that details. You're able to capture the details related to an event. And most times it is usually time-stamped that, okay, this request came here at a particular time, and these are the details of the request. When the request got to, the payment processor, for example, it was able to realize that it had 9 items in the cart, and then this is the price of the item. This is what we totaled the price at. So he gets all those granular details and kind of records them as an event. Now, these three may sound like, 3 different kind of data that you can wish to collect from your application. You can just collect one and not collect the other. Like I said, I know right now we collect metrics, logs, not so much of traces, which is what we are going into. But 3 of them actually works hand in hand, because as you can tell, with metrics, you are able to sort of know when you have a problem. It tells you the trend. It tells you, okay, looks like our application has been working fine up to this point, up to, this night. All of a sudden, everything just went down. All the customer's requests were failing. Every time a customer clicks on checkout, everything was failed. As opposed to before, at least only few will fail because, customers can have issues with their browser. But at this point, every customer's checkout request is actually failing. So you are able to get alarms that there is a problem. This is what you can use to generate alerts. This is what you can use to create KPIs that you want to track or monitor. this is, the aspect you can use to say, oh, we want to put some level of monitoring in place so we can get notified when there is an issue. But with traces, you are not going to be able to know where the problem is, because metrics will only tell you we have a problem, like the chart you saw. We only know we have a problem. How do we know where the problem is? How do we even know how to resolve the problem, right? So traces is going to be able to tell you what exact component is actually failing. Or we know these requests. We know almost all requests are failing right now. But what happened was that, let's take a sample request. The request was going through the journey of this application, and by the time it got to the payment processor, something was happening. For some reasons, we could not understand what the data is, or the data is in a format that we did not understand, right? So trace is going to help you identify the actual component where the problem is. Now with logs, you are not able to get that context as to, okay, we know the problem is failing here, but why is it failing, right? What is making it fail? So you're able to get that detail from the log, because in logs, you can add as much detail as you want. So the only limitation is the amount of memory you want to take, right, from wherever you're saving your log files in. But you can add as much detail that you want in your log. So with that, you can be able to get the context around, when the request got to this particular position, what are the data around it? What was the problem around it? So all I'm just trying to say is that, metric traces logs are the building blocks, I call them, of observability, but technically they work hand in hand. And if you want full stack observability, which is another term they've been using lately, if you want full stack observability, the way you have full stack application, you probably want to have these three in place in your application in any way or form. Now, so far, I've been talking about, collecting data, because all these metrics, traces, logs, they are data you probably want to collect from your system. They are telemetry data, right? But when it comes to observability, you don't want to stop at data, right? Because if I'm just stopping at collecting my data, how do I want to be able to make use of it? And that brings us to what is called an observability framework. It's like, first off, I want to instrument my code, which is, my application, whether we have either a React application, a Node.js application, or a ASP.NET Core application. How do I instrument the application to be able to get data from it? Now, this instrumentation is going to depend on the tool you're using, right? Which we're going to go into in a bit. So depending on the tool, because each tool will come with their own either agent, SDK, package that you need to install into your application. That would not allow you to be able to say, we can collect data from your application. Now, when you instrument your application with whatever agent or API or tool or SDK that your tool is providing, you can collect this data, and then you get to store it in a particular backend data storage. So either most tools right now kind of come with these three in place. I don't know if I can use a Lisa pointer. So most tools right now kind of come with these three in place, right? Including having an agent that allows you to instrument your code. Then that agent helps with data collection, and then even probably a place where you can store it. Or sometimes the backend data storage will probably be a file system, which is going to be living side by side with where your code is. Or sometimes you can even use an external sort of data storage. So either you want to store your data in the cloud so that it's kind of persistent or something. All those things are things that your tool is going to provide for you. They're going to provide you with that capability to be able to do whatever you want with it. Then you've collected this data and it's somewhere. You don't stop there. What you now do is either you are, analyzing this data to be able to understand what is going on with this data, which will require some form of visualization. So you need to have a way where you can either some charts or, you need some form of UI where you can be able to see this data you're getting, see it in the understandable format that you can read and kind of analyze, right? And then on the other hand, based on this data, you can create some form of monitoring and alert, which is what we've been doing before, but now we are trying to enhance, right? So now just going back a little bit, monitoring and alert. Before we've been doing monitoring, where you just say, hey, we noticed that 80% of containers are failing. Now, that is monitoring and alert. When you send an alert, literally right now, with more observability, you can enrich that alert. I should have shown a sample of alert. You can enrich that alert with some charts. You can enrich that alert with visualization you've gotten based on your data to say, hey, this is the chart to back up this claim. We are sending an alert saying that 80% of containers are failing, but look at the charts, look at the trend. You see that these containers are failing. You can add in the traces to say, hey, this is the trace backing up this alert, and this seems to be where the problem is. Kind of we help the person that gets this alert to say, okay, I think I know where to start from, right? So you don't be crying. So yeah, so that's kind of like a framework, and most tools sort of try to come with all this different levels of the framework in place. But some tools sort of help with, some aspect of this framework, while you sort of have to connect to another tool to get other aspects of the framework. And that is going to bring us to, I need to stop this later point. Yeah. So that's going to bring us to what is called tools and platforms of observability. Again, before I move on, is there any question?
We do have a question. We
Okay.
have a question in from Monica, and Monica's asking, do you have to observe every container in case one of the container failed as it was unknown? Also, if there are previous records of measures of containers, it would have been a large amount of data to understand. How did you manage to find and resolve it?
Okay, good question. Sorry, let me see if I get the question correctly. So it's do you have to observe every container in the case of, one container failed as it was unknown? Okay. That first part, I don't really get it clearly, but I'm trying to understand. Let me guess that what you mean is, let's assume, obviously we have like thousands of containers that we're tracking. So are we checking each and every of this container? Okay, I'll come back then. And also if there is previous records of measures, it should have been a large, okay. So more around concern is around the data, right? And having to process large volumes of, in this case, containers. I hope I got that right.
Does that sound right, Monica? Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So to answer the question, in terms of are we having to track each and every container that has failed? Now, that is where metrics come in. If you remember, I said metrics are aggregatable. So technically, we are not, saving all the details about these containers, which sometimes we could do, because in our case, we actually do. We save each and every data as regards to the container because we have the bandwidth, we have the space to have that large amount of data. But in case if you don't, and we have a reason why we do that, but in case if you don't, technically, what you're doing is to count. So when it comes to using the analogy of containers and maybe requests, for example, what I'm trying to do is, we process a container when the container is, when the container is failing versus when the container is LD, we are counting it. So it's not like, I am saving each of the status of this container every single time. We have different levels of metrics or data collection in place. So I know I mentioned that we save like the container name, the container details. That's not something we do every single time, right? There is different time spans between each other. So in terms of metrics, which is something you want to collect more frequently because it's time series and time-based, you are not getting the details. You are just tracking the counts. I just know that, in this, particular cluster, we have 1,000 containers. How many are healthy versus how many are failed, right? And this is something you do in one process. And all you save is the data of healthy versus failed. So I'm not saving each data when it comes to metrics. And that is something we call it more frequently. But when it comes to the logs, we are having more details about the container. This is where we have more details about the container name and all, but we don't collect it very frequently. Maybe it's once a day or something, but it kind of just helps that, oh, we're able to get more details whenever there is a problem about the container. I don't know if that helps, but what I'm just trying to tell you is, it's back to my point of saying these three things kind of work hand in hand. One, starting for metrics, is something you probably collect more frequently because it's time series and you're able to, it allows you to know when there is a problem as fast as possible. You don't collect so much level of data when it comes to that. You are collecting, you are aggregating the data, you are saving the data, like you are, bundling the data together. In terms of requests, you are collecting 15 minutes. Sorry, I just read something. So you are collecting like failed requests as opposed to like, successful requests. And then you can now go more granular as you go into logs. So I don't know if that helps to answer the question, but yeah, I can kind of explain more in details if that doesn't help. Kind of, we are running out of time. So I just got reminded, as I mentioned 15 minutes. So yeah, let me just move on quickly. So coming to tools and platforms, this is, I don't know if you identify any of these things on the screen, but these are kind of logos of kind of popular tools you've probably been hearing of. You must have heard of Prometheus, especially if you're working in the container and Kubernetes environment. You must have heard of Grafana, heard of Jaeger, Zipkin. These are like different tools that you probably hear every day. I've heard of them and I've been like so confused. But technically what is happening is that this tool, Prometheus and Memea, kind of helps with metrics collection, right? So they provide the instrumentation that I talked about and the ability to be able to collect that telemetry data, able to collect metrics. So the aggregatable data I'm talking about, this helps you with it. Then this one are tools that kind of helps you to collect traces. And these are tools that helps you to collect and maybe analyze logs. And then with this one, you can do more analytics and visualization of that data. So technically, these are like several tools you can use to instrument or enhance your code to be able to collect whatever data you want to collect. And then in turn, also analyze or visualize that data. Now, like I said, some tools that come with instrumentation that allows you to instrument your code come with the storage as well, right? They have the backend. So for example, Prometheus has a backend that comes with it. And then you don't have to worry about where you store your data. And you can just connect a Grafana, you can connect Grafana to it to be able to visualize the data that is stored on it. Okay, so technically right now you're like, okay, this sounds like so many tools that I have to use. And then I have to be instrumenting or I have to be keeping track of several tools in several places, right? Yes, they sound like several tools, which is why we have something called platforms that give what is called full stack observability. So if you have heard of, Datadog, Dynatrace, New Relic, there's like a whole lot of them, right? Most of them have been into the monitoring space for a while. And then now they are beginning to go into observability in like full wing. So they provide you that end-to-end platform that you need. So they have probably just one agent that you install or add to your application, and then it can get every telemetry data that you want. Some of them even come inbuilt, like with telemetry data that they know every application will need. Like I said, response time, field requests, all those things are what every application will want. So they come inbuilt with it, such that once you install the agent, it just, you're able to get some data firsthand without even having to do anything, right? But the downside to it is that most of this are kind of paid for. They are kind of like, having to use some sort of cloud services or cloud yeah, it's just like you trying to use some sort of, cloud services, right? You have to pay for it. Is that pay as you go or kind of subscription based, right? And if you're getting started with something, if you're like me, I want to try it, right? So what can I use? What is a tool out there that can allow me to get all this full stack telemetry data without me having to pay for it? And that is where Grafana came with something called Looks Good to Me. When I saw it actually first out, I was like, wow, that sounds cool. So what they did was that they provided a full stack, observability platform tool. So you don't have to leave their ecosystem and you can get whatever tool you have. So you have just like one agent or one thing you have to install into your application, just kind of what most of this, platforms provide. And then you can get logs, you can get traces, you can get metrics, and then you can now use the Grafana dashboard to actually visualize it, right? So it's like I said, providing what this other platform provides, but it's sort of open source. So you have the ability to kind of enjoy or, make use of or do what your observability you want to do without having to at least pay for it. I think to a whole large extent, you probably don't want to, you don't need to pay for it until when you start processing a large amount of data. So if you want to get started with full stack observability, that is a place to start from. And I already added the link, so you probably can read more about it. Most of them are like super easy to get started on. But then again, I know you're like, well, what if I start using Grafana today and tomorrow I want to switch to, Datadog, or I want to switch to another provider entirely. So do I have to kind of go back to rewrite my code or install this agent again and all that, right? So that has been, I think that was a very big problem when people started to get into observability, because like there are like several thousands of tools out there, especially when it comes to logs. There's thousands of tools. So how do I switch from one tool to another without having to go back to my code every single time? And then we came to the term open telemetry. So maybe you've heard of this or not heard of it. Me, myself, I'm still trying to understand it, so it's okay. So open telemetry is sort of like a standard. It's kind of like, I just call it the language of observability. Sort of, it's like installing or instrumenting your code with just one sort of tool, and that tool allows you to be able to plug into every other tool, right? So instead of me having to instrument my code with, Loki and then Prometheus and then Zipkin, and whenever I want to switch to Jaeger, I come back again. So it's like a whole lot of mess when you're having to deal with that. But with open telemetry, I just need to do this once. I need to find the API and SDK that works with the language I'm writing, which could be any language. And once I've done that, I can, plug into or export this data or transfer this data to any tool that I want. You can go as far as, so instrument your application, and then you can say, oh, I'm exporting metrics to Prometheus, I'm exporting traces to Zipkin or Jaeger, and then the logs, I can either say I want to go to Loki, or like you can switch this as much as you want, especially if you're doing free trial kind of thing, and your free trial expires and you want to use another one. So you can do that with OpenTelemetry. And the beautiful thing about OpenTelemetry is, again, it comes with some data collection in place. Common data collection you would normally do, like, page load, latency time, request failures, all those kind of things, kind of comes with it in place. So sometimes when you just install it, you don't even need to do anything and you already start collecting data. Yeah, so I've, rumbled a lot and gone through a whole lot of, stories and things, and I hope I didn't confuse you. But one thing I just want to say is, no matter what you got from today's session, or whether you understand or you don't understand, I hope you did understand. I just want to, kind of encourage you to get started today, and you can start small. I know people tend to say, metrics is like the first place to start with observability, but when it comes to starting small, I always say start with logs, because in one way or the other, you're already doing logging. if you check some people's code today, you're already seeing print statements. You're seeing console.log in their code, because whenever there is a problem, you're trying to use console.log to understand what the problem is. So in one way, you're already doing logging. So why don't you just standardize this, like move this, take it a step higher and actually start doing actual logging. There are tons of libraries that are super easy to use, especially when it comes to JavaScript. There are a whole lot of library that you can just, install or kind of add to your application, and you can start getting the logs, and then it sits in a file system, right? So start from there. Start from transferring all your console.log statements to actual real log files. That's something you can get started today, right now. So please start doing that. And then don't stop there. Go into actually full stack observability. I already mentioned that you can use Grafana today to have the whole full stack observability tool installed into your application, and you're getting all the full stack data and working with it. And it would allow you to embrace what we call observability driven development. That's kind of like, once you start developing your application, having observability in mind, as opposed to, oh, we finished the application, and that's when we realize that customers are complaining, and that's when we want to go back into, oh, let's start monitoring what customers are complaining about. No, like right from when you are, sorry. I'm so sorry. I hope you can see me back.
Okay.
Yeah, so right from when you start building your application, add observability to it. Like I said, it can be as simple as just adding logs to it. That's the simplest form I've seen, because it's something you're already doing, whether you know it or not. Kind of subconsciously, you want to get that detail, right? So add some form of observability to it right from when you are building your application, and embrace the term, observability kind of driven, observability driven development, sort of like, that buzzword new time that you're talking about. But it's just all about trying to shift observability kind of to the left of right from the initial stages of developing applications, start thinking of observability with it, right? So with that, I hope I've been able to sort of convince you and not confuse you about what exactly observability is and why you should start thinking about observability, and most importantly, how to get started. I know I didn't do like a whole detailed, story as regards the way to get started, but like I said, one good way is just start adding logs to your application. And yeah, with that, I would say thank you. And if there are any questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hope. That was awesome. You had absolutely a great talk. Let me have a look, see if we've got some questions. Okay, we have Nora was saying, insightful presentation, Hope. Quick question. Would you say Microsoft Clarity is a tool for observability since it allows visualization, metrics, and traces?
Microsoft Clarity. Actually, this is the first time I'm hearing about it. Interesting. And I work in Microsoft. This is what I was saying about. There is a whole lot that goes on you don't know about. I've actually not heard about it. And I am just researching it now.
Fair enough, fair enough.
Yeah, it happens a lot. So, oh, wow, I didn't know. I'm going to check and look into it. So, I mean, it's possible that we started to do that. But I know internally we did have. And then there is, when it comes to the cloud, I know they have like observability tools in place, but I didn't know they had a standalone or kind of, standalone application tool that you could use. I would kind of look into it. Thanks for mentioning it. So
We have Denise here. Not a question, but a compliment, so I thought I'd extend it. Last project I worked on, we implemented Sentry with the backend for Java. Not for us in front end, but good talk, Hope. Definitely helpful.
Yeah, yeah. I think somebody mentioned that, oh, having resource. So I'm going to add to my slides. There is a talk. I had somebody talked about somebody had a talk sometimes, and I think it was in London like last year, about observability in terms of front end, like full actual front end observability. So I will add the link of, I didn't watch it to the end. I don't know if it comes with tools, but one thing I know is I totally understand you that we sort of forget the front end guys when we building. But I know that you can, like I said, you can use logs. You can add logs to your actual front end application to start whenever, to actually start getting those insights, because technically you already do it. Like I said, you already do console.log. So it's like, I know there are tons of tools, like when you know, Bing search, or you chat GPT search, or for logs that can be used for Node.js app, or logs that can use for React app, you would probably see tons of tools that you can use.
That, that was actually a great answer, because we did have a question. I think you just like pretty much covered it, but just in case, I'm going to ask anyways. What learning resources or tutorials would you recommend to a front-end developer looking to deepen their understanding and skills in web observability? And we do have a link to your slides here as well.
Yeah, actually, yeah, I forgot to add it, but I just added this
Oh,
talk.
that's great.
Yeah, that's the talk I know they've talked about, but yeah, but the other aspect, like I said, is around login. I know that's one thing you can do, but when it comes to traces, I don't know so much, because, it's sort of different when it comes to the code that runs on actual user's application versus something that is running in a server or something. But log is something you can obviously do. I know that.
Yeah, that's great. So, yeah, we've got a YouTube link down here. Thank you. Thank you so much, Hope, for that as well. And yeah, do we have any more questions for Hope? We're gonna be wrapping up in a couple minutes, so I want to make sure everyone has their chance to get their questions in. I'll give you a couple minutes here.
Yeah, and I added kind of my LinkedIn page to my LinkedIn, whatever, to my slides. So in case if you have any more questions, feel free to kind of send me a message and we can learn together, because I'm not an expert. So
yeah, that would be great. That would be great. Yeah. So LinkedIn just up here on Hope's screen, and that's in your slides as well, you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Let's see what we've got. Interesting talk, a lot to try out. Thanks, Hope. Yeah, a lot of great talks, very insightful. I agree, it was very insightful. I don't really have a ton of experience with the traces that you were mentioning, so it was great to hear about that from you. We've got a comment from Monica as well. I'm a beginner familiar with front-end development. Sorry about that, but definitely trying to include observability as I progress. Thank you for the great insights, Hope. Yeah, I agree. Excellent insights. It's been amazing. All right. Yeah, the recording will be available in a few days in our event recordings channel on Slack. But if no one has any more questions, I think we could say thank you and have a great rest of your Thursday evening.
Yeah.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hope. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, everyone.